Okay, everybody, I just want to welcome everyone this afternoon. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedules, I'm sure. I am Michael Bacon. I am the Director of Enterprise Solutions Marketing here at Exedian. And today I'm going to do a brief webinar on a topic that I think is near and dear to many customers' hearts right now, especially with the way the market's changing and the network is evolving. But it's entitled, "It Takes a Village to Stop Zero-Day Threats." So also, I will provide a copy of this presentation to anybody that wants it afterwards. All you have to do is email me. I'll just tell you what my email address is. It's mbacon@exedian.com. That's mbacon@exedian.com. So again, thank you for taking the time to be here today. What will we discuss in this webinar today? Well, first of all, we're going to talk about a brief use case. I believe in talking about real world problems and how they're applicable to everyday life and also to our businesses. So we're going to talk about a use case. We're going to talk about how the network has evolved and changed over the last several years. And we're also going to talk about some of the challenges that we see because of those changes. And we're also going to be addressing team missions and how we're seeing organizational changes across many different IT organizations, as well as we're going to talk about why the time is now to take action. Just a brief mention about our company, Exedian. If you're new to Exedian, we are based out of Montreal, Canada. We are well known for network performance. We've been in this space for quite some time. But more recently, we have come out with an NDR solution, or a network detection and response solution. So now we have both performance and security in the network, and those two things working together to mitigate risk in your environment for zero-day threats. Let's start with a brief use case. I don't want to take a lot of time today, so I want to just kind of dive in. In the past year, have been traveling throughout the United States, talking to different CIOs and different CISOs. And one of the topics that came up on one of my most recent visits down in Florida was with a CIO in a major banking institution who had an incident happen in their network. And he was describing to me what happened. So basically somebody called in, they reported a slow application. This application happened to be a mission critical application that they needed as part of their business. And as they always do, when there's a latency issue or a performance issue, they began to deploy a team to go work on that issue, which I'm sure many of you do the same. In fact, a lot of companies will actually implement Tiger teams and create Tiger teams to go work on different problems in the network. Well, what this implies is basically you're pulling people off of other things to work on your problem. Well, they did that. They pulled everybody in to try to solve the problem or figure out what the root cause was. And 3 days go by and they still don't know what's causing it. That's an awful lot of time for a business, 3 days. At the end of the third day, the security team basically found that there was some type of breach in the network. And neither team knew that the two problems were one and the same, or that they were related. So again, another day of shuffling basically after that, trying to figure out, okay, this incident, the security breach has caused these performance issues across our network. So what does that tell us? Well, that tells us a number of things. First, these siloed teams and the siloed team approach that they had didn't work. It also tells us that the tools were not integrated enough to be able to piece these parts together to see the whole story. And I included this chart kind of give you a feel for that, right? So the use case background I've already explained, but what were the challenges? The communication between the teams wasn't there. The integration wasn't there. The separation of tools and roles and responsibilities, all these different things contributed to this. In fact, the customer even misdiagnosed the problem at one point during this process, because they didn't know it was related to a security incident. And this resulted in the hackers doing whatever they did for that period of time. This also resulted in some unnecessary latency issues with applications and missing some of their business objectives and missing the SLAs they had promised their customer as well. And at the end of the day, it resulted in a poor customer experience for this particular business. Now, there's a lot of things driving the change that I'm talking about in the network, and I'm going to call it the modern day network because it's not the same network that we're familiar with from years ago. It's changed, it's evolved, and it continues to change. And everybody has heard about digital transformation, and everybody knows the push towards digital transformation. And depending on who you are, it may mean something slightly different. But we see a lot of factors as to why the network is changing. It's no longer just about your infrastructure, your hardware, but now things are moving to the cloud. We've got multiple cloud providers, multiple service providers. It's also becoming a perimeterless security model, which we'll get into in a little bit here in the presentation, because everybody's heavily invested now in the perimeter with firewall and different endpoint detection and other solutions that are out there in the market, but yet hackers continually get in. Also, hybrid work, working from home, as well as a shift to some of the newer technologies like SD-WAN, things like that. But in addition to all that, we see a major gap in terms of skills, not just on the security side, which we all know it's hard to find the right security people today, or if you do find them, it's hard to retain them. But we're also seeing on the network performance side, a lot of people retiring and the skills starting to have some gaps on that side as well. So, these are all things contributing to the changing network. And as a result, the way that we look at a network and the way that we use a network is slightly different. For example, we used to be more focused on speeds and feeds. Almost all the vendor presentations in the past were all about speeds and feeds. Well, that's old school. And yes, that's still relevant. However, it's not where people are focused. The network is now evolving, and you need to be more proactive in terms of how you manage your network, whether that be your user experience or optimization, but also not just being focused on performance itself, but even the security that's built in, even from a DevOps perspective, when you build things to make sure security is not an afterthought, but security is actually built into what you're deploying, and being able to close and identify those gaps ahead of time before you have a major breach in your network. And also, it's not about basic monitoring and detection anymore. It's more about the intelligence that you get from the data. Of course, we all know AI and machine learning, and sometimes that's used a little loosely. But what does that translate to? It translates to intelligent insights that allow you to take action to reduce your risk or to avoid an impact to your customer community or your user community. And last but not least, it's not basic troubleshooting anymore on your on-prem solution. It's now more complex because it could be the application, it could be the infrastructure for the network, it could be a service provider, it could be in the cloud somewhere through multiple cloud providers. So as you see, even troubleshooting is more complex now because of all the different things you have to look at. So having a single tool and platform is going to be extremely important there. At the same time, security threats are growing both in frequency and sophistication. As we all know, this is top of mind. We also know that most of the budget in most companies right now are moving towards security, where it used to be in other areas of IT. It's now being driven by the security team. We see that there are multiple attacks coming from multiple directions. Hackers are getting a little trickier in terms of how they do things. For example, in this day and age, most of the new threats that are coming out, the zero-day threats, are actually in the network themselves. So they are not focusing on firewall now. They're not focusing on endpoints as much anymore. It's going to be something that's going to happen in your network. In fact, a lot of times there are threats in our networks that get unnoticed, and the person could be sitting there for not weeks or months, but even years in some cases until they strike. One of the other tactics that hackers are using today is that they're attacking from different fronts at the same time, so that you go fight one fire and they're coming in the back door somewhere else. It's more of a diversionary tactic that they use. The complexity of these attacks is much more difficult to recognize these things. In fact, most solutions now have behavioral analytics as part of their solution, because It's not only about having a bunch of data, which everybody's collecting data. Back in the old days, that's what we all did. We grabbed all the data from logs, and we thought the more data that we had, the smarter we would be, or we'd be able to find problems faster. But truthfully, that's not really the way it works, because not all data is the same. In fact, sometimes you can have too much data. But what you're looking for in the data is you're looking for the patterns in the behavior. So when we talk about this convergence story that I'm going to get into here shortly, we're talking about data from both security and performance, and how you put that data together to solve a security threat or reduce risk to that security threat ahead of time. So looking for patterns, well, that means that a security person has to know something about the network, if they don't have the right tools, or they don't have the right visibility or the right insights. So traditionally, security people don't have that type of a knowledge of a network. Yet a performance person is going to be very intimately aware of what's normal and what's not normal in a network. And as you know, it's the things you don't know about that are the most threatening to your environment, because we have databases of known threats, and we have, systems that automatically detect things that have been seen before, but it's the things you have not seen before that are the biggest threat to your environment. And on top of that, this is costing the business in a lot of ways, not just from a financial perspective, but also even productivity, as well as the operational efficiencies that we're trying to drive are affected by that. But biggest and the most is even brand name recognition can be impacted as well, based on some of these things. So we see, and we all know that there's all kinds of security solutions out there. Now look at this list that I put here in the left-hand column. It's a lot of products. It's a lot of services, and some of the companies that we work with today, some of them are building things out themselves, and some of them are outsourcing and hiring another company to provide the people and the products. And sometimes there's a hybrid model. Well, between all these tools that I have listed here, performance monitoring solutions and user experience monitoring, testing, pen testing, advanced threat protection, all these different things, MDR solutions, EDR solutions, XDR, SIMs, and SOARs. Yet with all these technologies in place, in 2021, in a recent survey, 80% of organizations ran as many as 10 solutions at the same time for data protection and cybersecurity, yet more than half of them suffered downtime because of data loss. I mean, more than 50% were impacted, even though they had 10 solutions running at the same time. And why is that? Because hackers are focused on basically the gaps that are between our technology stacks and between our teams and between our processes. They're getting more intelligent in terms of where they're striking and how they're striking and how often they're going to strike. So what we see right now is the two worlds are colliding. I'm a big Star Trek fan. I don't know how many of you like Star Trek or sci-fi, but this is the reality of what's happening right now. We're seeing a collision course between two worlds. If you look at most organizations today, there are structures that we are still have in place today that we've been using 25 years, 20 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, but it's very much based on silos. We have siloed teams. For example, the security team is its own empire, and the performance team is its own empire. And a lot of times there's finger pointing between those teams. And furthermore, when there are events that happen in the network, these teams are managed separately. So a lot of times there's overlap of responsibilities. There's time that's wasted. For example, every time we had to pull together a Tiger team of experts across the different areas, that takes them off of key projects. That takes them off of things that they could be doing to help drive the business, right? Deploying more applications or growing the business model. But there is a collision course happening, and the more companies that you talk to, the more articles that you read, the more that you see, even in job descriptions, which I'll give an example a little later, is that these two worlds are now starting to converge. Now, there's different models that are happening in terms of collaboration, in terms of team structure, things like that, but I'll get into some of those examples in a minute. So there is a need to collaborate. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. In fact, almost everybody I talk to agrees that collaboration could be better between these teams. And I think most people recognize in many organizations, there are silos that do exist. And I think we'd all agree that the problems are more complex. But one of the things that we need to look at as well is the opportunity for tool consolidation, process updates, best practices, skill gaps, areas where we can begin to do cross-pollination of skills across teams, different things like that. Now, Enterprise Management Associates, I put a quote down here. They're also known as EMA. They've done a lot of studies on Converged in the past year. In fact, there's all kinds of articles, not just from Exedian out there, but also through some other companies that EMA has helped do the research for. So if you want to learn more about that, we even put out a white paper with EMA recently that we can send you the link to. So again, reach out to me if you'd like that. So what is the outcome of siloed Netops and Secops? Well, as you see, this gap creates several different problems, and I just focused on these four. Divergent priorities is a huge one because, see, the security team, their priorities are different than a network operations team. But a lot of times what we end up with is duplicate efforts. We got two people working on the same problem from a different angle, but none of them are sharing information, or the tools don't work together so we can actually really know what's happening. These siloed tools, they operate in a vacuum. So this is an issue that a lot of companies are addressing through tool consolidation, or being able to create one dashboard, or linking events together using a SIM or whatever to try to tell the true story of what's happening in your network. But here's another one that people don't talk about a lot. It's a real pain area, and it is the data ownership issues that we have in company. A lot of companies, the data is owned by certain groups, and you don't have access to that data. So when you're trying to solve a problem that transcends across security and performance, a lot of time you don't even have all the data that you need to actually see where the root cause is, or to reduce the risk that needs to be reduced. In the end, the results of this is poor time to resolution, poor customer experience, increased risk, as well as higher costs, as we've already addressed. So here's a model of siloed versus converged. Time to resolution is huge, whether you're on the performance side or the security side. But when you have these two worlds together, it may even be more important, because not only are you having to reduce risk from that security incident, but you also need to restore service or to keep your SLA. So how do you know you've failed your SLA, for example? Productivity rates are also impacted. So in a converged model, the productivity rate is going to be much greater than it's going to be if you have siloed teams and siloed tools. And I've already touched on these other things, but cost savings is also an area that if you're talking to CISOs and CIOs and even CEOs, they care about how much money it takes to run their business. Now, when you talk about small to mid-sized enterprises specifically, this is where it gets really important to have this discussion. This converged model, I was talking to a government agency, which I won't give the name of that agency, where they are having that problem because they have only enough budget to fund one team. And now they're having to choose between funding a performance team and a security team. And this model here, they're able to save money and actually consolidate their teams and actually take advantage of the converged model that I'm mentioning. So I also talked to a recent CIO at a university. It was a recent conversation I had, and she went on record to state that they don't have money for a CISO today. Now, a lot of companies are using what they call VC CISOs, but she also pointed out we also don't have the money to hire security people because they're too expensive. So we're looking for opportunities to have tools that not only work together, but also simplify the skill sets that are needed so that we can solve complex problems. And she pointed out that she thinks the market is actually going to move in this direction very strongly in the next year to two. or you're going to see more and more teams look at different models and the different ways of organizing to be more effective in this converged world. So there are two types of models emerging in IT organizations today. First, you have the two teams that are highly collaborative. That's how I label it. So you still have two independent teams. You have a security team, you have an operations team, yet these teams are more integrated in terms of their processes and how they work together. They may even have consolidated tool sets if they see a need for that. But they also have joint ownership for problems. And this is a big thing, because a lot of times somebody has to take ownership for a problem. And in the old world, the performance team is pointing at the security team, and the security team is pointing at the performance team. And then they're both pointing to the service provider as to being the problem. And again, days go by and you don't have any resolution. So having two teams is okay as long as they're highly integrated. Now, a single team approach is where a lot of companies are moving. I mentioned that a minute ago with this university. They're looking to have a single team with a single tool that has a single dashboard that reduces the skills that are needed, that helps them get to root cause quickly, whether it be a performance issue or a security issue. And they're looking for one throat to choke as a vendor, because they don't have time to chase vendors. So as you see here, Gartner Group for years has been talking about the high cost of downtime. And so when you take all these things and put them together, if you don't have one of these solutions in place, you're risking major impact to your business with downtime. Now, they say back, and this was years ago, that it was an average of $5,600 a minute for every minute of downtime. But I want to tell you, it's much greater than that today. So it all comes down to three things. I'm trying to simplify this a little bit, down to the people, the processes, and the tools. So there's a cultural change, and I'll get into that in a minute, that has to happen if you're going to have a converged mindset. From a people perspective, you're going to have to do some retraining, some cross-training, what I call cross-pollination between teams, and you're going to have to drive collaboration between those teams to tear down those silos. It can't be my department or your department. It has to be our company and our company goals. And I will just say this for the record, and like I said, I'm going to get into that in a minute a little bit more, but in many cases, this requires a different way of thinking from your C-levels, from your CEO all the way down, where they understand the need to create a single team or a highly collaborative environment where you're going to be able to get to these issues quickly. Now, if it doesn't start at the top, then people continue to do empire building or continue to do what they did instead of working together in many cases. So there has to be some accountability and a cultural change from the top. From a process point of view, we want to remove all that duplication that I mentioned earlier, but also improving your operational efficiencies. How can we drive faster time to resolution? How can we get ahead of problems? How can we be more proactive with the data that we have? How do we eliminate those blind spots? How do we outsmart hackers? All these different things. So processes help drive that. Now, to me, processes are not a one and done. I believe that processes are an ongoing piece of work. In other words, you need to keep building on your processes, learn what does work, learn what doesn't work. So when a problem happens in your environment or in your network, you can revisit that, do a lessons learned, and make tweaks to your processes so that you continue to shut down any gaps that are there. And also, we've touched on the tools and the tool reduction, but also having the built-in intelligence and the behavioral analytics, and be able to recognize those patterns in the data quickly so that you don't waste time. And I call this the unified network. That's kind of a name I came up with, because that's what it is. We're unifying the network, we're unifying the teams, we're driving higher collaboration, and we're reducing cost and risk. So there's also a whole bunch of surveys I mentioned earlier. As you see here, NetSecOps is also what people call this. It's a single team approach. And you'll see here that 90% of the people surveyed in this report stated that they're already in the process of building some type of collaboration between those teams. Now, that being said, I think that everybody has a different way of approaching it and a different way of thinking about it. As you see here, there's also some other data on the right that says There's separate teams that rarely never collaborate, or a unified team for security and network. And notice how that one's growing at 37%. So there are some trends in the market that suggest that there's already companies moving in this direction. And on top of that, there's even jobs that are being posted. And this is from a large financial institution in the United States. And you'll see here, if you read this description closely, you'll see that this network security operations manager seems to be a hybrid role between network performance and security. So they're already starting to post positions out there that have a converged approach. So how do you get started? Well, here's some more data for you. The 4 areas on the left are the 4 areas where the network operations and security teams see value in collaboration. I think there's more than that, but troubleshooting got the top score, believe it or not, because if you can't get to root cause or respond to an incident quickly, that's going to give your company a bad reputation. It's going to also cause customers to be angry and maybe even cause some lawsuits, as we see recently. Even some of the top security companies in the cloud who claim to be secure, customers are suing them now because they're not as secure as they promised, and they didn't solve the problem in a reasonable time, had to shut down their system. I'm not going to name what vendor that was, obviously, but 32% said operational monitoring, 30% said infrastructure design and implementation, and 30% said technology evaluation and procurement. And also, if you look to the right, you can see where some of the integration is in the data center. Of course, the data center is no longer on-prem. It's extended now, right? And then cloud workloads and Internet of Things and all these other bring your own devices, et cetera. So there's huge opportunity for collaboration, especially when you look in the different verticals like manufacturing, and you look in financial verticals, et cetera, even healthcare. So I included this model I put together. In the end, I'm hoping you get the trophy. I'm hoping you win the prize and you reduce risk in your environment and you can save money and save time. So I simplified it. First thing you need to do is unify your culture. And that, again, may have to start at the top. Somebody has to make the decision to change. I always ask the question is, what you're doing now, is it getting you the results that you need? And that's a question I always ask myself in anything that I ever do. So you got to ask the same thing in your culture, in your environment, in your company. Is what we're doing working? And in fact, not just is it working today, but will it work tomorrow? If a 0-day threat happens, if something happens and we're hacked, are we prepared? Are we ready? And here's the deal. Nobody can guarantee that you're 100% protected from hackers. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and make that statement, as bold as it may sound. Nobody can 100% protect you. I don't care who they are or what they claim. At the end of the day, you're going to have a solution that's going to help you get to root cause quickly and reduce risk quickly and be able to communicate that out to your customer base quickly. If you don't have that type of solution, then you need to reevaluate. But also you have to look at the skill sets that you have, which we're going to get into here in a minute. So assess what? Assess your budgets, your team structure, your tool sets, how things look today, how things work today. Do a test run, pretend like there's an incident that happens in your network and your performance of an application is suffering, and then see what happens. Test it out. Integration has to happen. So you'll need to look at opportunities to integrate your tools, integrate your processes, et cetera. But skills, there needs to be a plan to address skill gaps. If you can't hire the right people, consider outsourcing the work, or consider having tools that don't require as much skill, which is even more ideal. Now, it is not wrong to think outside the box in terms of, if I can't build the products fast enough, if I can't build the teams fast enough, then let me look at a managed service, a company that has something that provides the products, that provides the people, that provides the expertise that I can hold accountable. Also, the processes themselves. Now, a lot of companies do not update their processes. They don't look at best practices. They don't know where the market's going. They don't know where the risk is. This is something you should be doing on a regular basis. I mean, I would say at least quarterly, I'd go back and look at what my processes are and see if they're the right processes and if they're going to be able to address any risks that I have in my environment. And then also focus. Don't focus on the past, focus on the future, focus on where you're going and the goals that you put in place. And last but not least, the biggest one, and nobody likes this word, patience. Have patience. Let this have time to begin to work in your environment or in your company, because you've been doing what you've been doing for years in some of your cases, right? Some of you have been doing the same thing, same team structure, same type of products, same type of processes. Now you're doing something new. Give it time and work out the kinks and be patient and see that you get the results that you're driving against. Now, part of that patience is also looking at your metrics and also analyzing your KPIs to make sure you're tracking as part of that as well. So real quick, 3 more slides and we're done. Again, I didn't want to keep you too long, but hopefully you're getting some value out of this. I'm always available, by the way, to talk about this, so feel free to reach out to me as well. So from an Exedium point of view, we do present a converged approach. In fact, there's not many vendors that do. I challenge you to go look at some of the performance, network performance companies out there and network security companies out there that have solutions, and try to cobble together a solution that works. And many of these companies don't have both. In fact, we take it a step further. Not only do we provide you a single platform for both performance and security, but we do it from a single sensor. So you're going to deploy one sensor or one agent, and it's going to get you the same data that you need for both security and performance. And then we're going to take that data and we're going to enrich that data, so you only have the data you need. And we're going to create metadata out of that. And then it's all based on packet data, which is layer 2 through layer 7. And then we're going to be able to tell you whether there is a pattern in that data that is tied back to an incident, right? In fact, we even do the hard work for you as we get into NDR in a minute, where we actually create incidents instead of just 1,000 alerts like you get across a lot of products. So it's a single platform that does detection and response. It provides not only reactive alerting, but also proactive monitoring. So you can actually test things, and actually, once you've identified risk, you can take actions to tweak that so you're not hit by that, but also the intelligent insights that you need to recognize the zero-day threats that are coming into your environment. So there's 2 products that make this up. First is our Skylight product. Skylight's been in the market for some time now. It is our performance monitoring and analytics tool. So we do provide analytics as part of this. So, in fact, you can actually use it as a data ingestion engine as well. So you can actually take data from other places and bring it into our analytics engine as well. And then you can have KPIs that you monitor off of, as well as now we're coming out with this new feature, which allows you to roll it up into a particular business service. So you can manage your whole network experience, whether it be an end user that you want to monitor their end user experience, or it be just tweaking your network so that you're going to have the performance that's expected, as well as monitoring your SLAs to make sure you're hitting your SLAs as well. But we also have just come out with a brand new product, which is our Skylight Interceptor product, which is network detection and response. Now, this is, and some people ask the question, okay, why do I need an NDR solution? I have an MDR solution. I have a XDR solution. I've got an EDR solution. I've got all these different solutions. I go back to what I said earlier. This is a sweet spot because we are already the experts at the network. We know what's normal. We know what's not normal. And what's happening today is you have a lot more insider type threats that are in the network itself. That could be a malicious attack, or that could be just a negligent employee who's careless, or it could be a supply chain issue. As you know, today, supply chain attacks are huge. Ransomware is huge. But a lot of this is happening inside the network itself. In fact, if you go study this recent event that I told you about, you'll find out that was in the network. So we're focused a lot of times on all the investment we've had in the outside, and for example, the firewalls and the endpoints and whatever. But what's really happening is they've now avoided all that by going into the network itself. So you can proactively manage what's happening in your network now. You can even do threat hunting. So you can actually look for things that look suspicious inside of the network now. And what's beautiful is if there is a security event happening on a particular IP address that could be traced back to your performance side, so you can see how these things correlate across each other. So you can take action now on both sides. So anyway, this is NDR. I'd be glad to have a meeting with you, set up a demo if anybody wants to see this and show you the value of both our performance and our security solution working together to provide the converged model. So there's many advantages we've talked about today: single platform, single sensor, faster MTTR, unified teams, and lower cost. But I do believe that this is the time for many companies to take action. In fact, if you want to go back and do some research, like I suggested earlier, around EMA reports and what customers are saying, and perhaps some of you've already experienced some of the pain that I've described in this webcast, and you'd like to have some discussions about that. Again, I hope you'll reach out to me and we can talk some more. Anyway, again, thank you for your time today. I hope that you found this educational, but also I'd be glad to meet and answer any questions that you have. You can email me at mbacon@exedian.com. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.